you don't have to know your mentor. Your mentor doesn't have to be on the third floor, doesn't have to be in the C-suite, doesn't have to be someone that you work with or know every day. Most of my mentors, I've never met. Most of my mentors don't even know I'm alive.
As a mentor himself, Miller knows how important mentorship can be to your growth, both professionally and personally.
It's your sharing your wisdom with someone who's on a perhaps similar or even different journey than you are. It's not you trying to take your talents and place them onto them. It's you listening and asking big, bold questions. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And is there anything in my own journey, my messes or my successes, my failures or my triumphs, that if I were to share with you unvarnished, that you could learn from them and employ those in your life?
Scott Jeffrey Miller is a Wall Street Journal best-selling author, host of the fastest-growing leadership podcast, On Leadership with Scott Miller, presented by Franklin Covey, and the author of Master Mentors, 30 Transformative Insights from Our Greatest Minds.
In many cases, the same thing happened at the end of each interview. There were so many great insights that were shared, perhaps either through our friendship or a business partnership or something either on or oftentimes off air, that I thought that viewers and readers of the Master Mentors book series could really adopt and benefit into their own life. It's been a remarkable journey to have read their books, to have listened to their own interviews, and to curate a unique conversation to our podcast, where now some of the key transformational insights have come alive in Lit's video book, Master Mentors.
Let's join Miller for a journey through the silver screen with some of his own mentors. Ranging from authors and educators to leadership experts, we'll dive into the personal stories and insights of 7 master mentors.
At its basis, of course, it is about how these people have mentored me, maybe formally or informally. But what I like most about the response is that people are getting interested in being a mentor. They ask me all the time, what are the criteria for being a mentor? How do you find a mentor? And it's allowed me to have a voice in the conversation. I wrote this book and now I'm bringing it to life on video because there were so many great insights that were shared that viewers and readers of the Master Mentors book series could really adopt and benefit into their own life.
So come along and join Miller for the next act. Nellie Gallant. Chapter 1. Nellie Gallant.
Nellie Gallant is a force of nature. She will make you think I'm in a coma because she has unbridled energy and passion. This is a remarkable entrepreneur and author. I love this woman because A, she's contagiously positive, but B, she's willing to hype her failures. And that's the name of the chapter in this video book, is about being comfortable with your failures. Hype them, talk about them, teach through them, and talk about all the problems, the hundreds of ideas or businesses or job offers or bankruptcies that went wrong. Welcome to being human.
Nellie Gallant is a self-made Emmy Award-winning producer and media mogul who served as the first Latina president of entertainment for Telemundo. Gallant is also the author of the New York Times best-selling book, Self-Made, Becoming Empowered, Self-Reliant, and Rich in Every Way. Let's roll the picture and listen to Gallant's insights and personal story.
I think the most important part of my story is that I'm an immigrant, and not just an immigrant, a political refugee. You know, my parents, when I was 5 years old, had to leave a communist regime in Cuba. And from one day to the next, your parents who went to college, who had degrees, who were making money, who were in their mid to late 30s, had little kids, and all of a sudden, all the money in the bank was frozen. They couldn't take their money. They had to leave all their possessions and start all over again, go from Spain to the United States, go live in New Jersey. My parents didn't know how to speak English. I quickly watched TV and I became fluent quickly. I became the translator, the therapist, the everything. I had to become a grown-up at 5. And I think that prepared me for an entrepreneurial life.
Galan became one of the youngest guest editors at 17 magazine, and then moved on to work at PBS as a reporter for a documentary series for teenagers called Checking It Out.
One of the things people don't realize is that life is an obstacle course. It doesn't get easier. And so if you don't make yourself over, if you're not self-driven, if you don't understand this is a long distance run, if you don't embrace fear and failure, you're not going to make it.
Becoming a self-starter inevitably involves sacrifice.
I think that people misinterpret sacrifice with suffering. Sacrifice is not suffering. Even if it's your $300 apartment where you're eating, dollar egg sandwiches from the corner, because you are actually sacrificing to build something greater than yourself. And when you go and try to be everywhere and do everything and show up to everything, you are watching other people do. You're not doing what other people watch. You don't become a great writer without writing a lot, and a lot of junk before you write something good. So mastery takes time and sacrifice.
Dedication and sacrifice eventually paid off.
And I was lucky enough to go interview a man by the name of Norman Lear, which many people know, a very big producer in Hollywood. And he and the partner just liked me. And I think I was the only Latina they had met. And they go, you need to leave CBS and come and work for us. I quit CBS. I went to work for these two men. I was employee one of what eventually became Telemundo. When I was there, it was a rinky-dinky little college station. And it changed my whole life.
Afterward, Galan founded her own company, Galan Entertainment, producing more than 700 television shows. Additionally, Galan Entertainment successfully launched international channels abroad for companies such as HBO, ESPN, Fox, MGM, and Sony.
I think it's important for young people to also hear, I've only succeeded really 2 or 3 times. I have failed thousands of times to get 2 or 3 big successes. And really, that's all anybody remembers, is the 2 or 3 big successes. However, the failures have been vast in my personal life, in my business life. I mean, I've made 750 shows. Only 3 have been really pretty successful. The rest, not that they're failures, but they're not anything to talk about.
But no matter how painful a failure may be, it is important to keep it in perspective.
I've had to make fear and failure my best friends. You have to be a gymnast that falls. You get back on the horse. You get right back up. You might cry. You might take a night or 2 or a week or 2 weeks or 2 months and mourn it. But you have to get back because failure is going to teach you where you need to go.
In the next chapter, we'll be introduced to Liz Wiseman and learn why recognizing multipliers and diminishers is so important for leaders in the workplace. Chapter 2. Liz Wiseman.
As a leader, as a multiplying leader, your job and your key contribution is igniting and multiplying the genius in those around you. I thought that being the chief marketing officer meant that I was the genius. No, my job was to be the magnet, the person that brought in that talent. It was after reading Liz's book, Multipliers, that I stepped aside from being the chief marketing officer. 7-figure job. It wasn't worse. It was better. It was better than when I was the CMO. It was quite a testament to her content to recognize that after the supposed genius, right, the marketing genius and Scott Miller left, stuff got better.
Liz Wiseman is an executive advisor, researcher, and author of the New York Times best-selling books Multipliers, How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter, and The Multiplier Effect, tapping the genius inside our schools. Wiseman is also the CEO of the leadership research and development firm, the Wiseman Group, whose client list includes Apple, AT&T, Disney, Nike, and Google. So sit back and enjoy as we learn more from Liz Wiseman.
How I first got involved in leadership development was really, honestly, the work of some master mentors. It set this aspiration for me to be that kind of teacher that made people love learning about how to be a good leader, how to be a great contributor in the workplace.
Wiseman had the opportunity to observe many great leaders while spending time at the computer software company Oracle.
Oracle hired amazing people, and they hired people who were just smart, brilliant, driven, achievement-oriented, and who were nice and interesting to be around. And, I just landed in this pool of all of these really smart, capable people. I felt just truly, truly grateful to work there. I didn't feel like, oh man, I don't deserve to be here, but I just felt lucky. But I started to notice some things as I started to watch all of these geniuses around me. Some of these people who were brilliant, once they got put into management, they still were brilliant, but the people around them didn't get to be as smart as they could be. Like somehow their intelligence, their ideas, their capability was so prominent in a meeting or a discussion that everyone else started to hold back. But I'm like, what is going on here? Like, does our intelligence or capability level actually rise or fall based on the people that were around and based on how leaders are operating? So I went out and interviewed 50 plus successful professionals and asked them to describe an experience working for a leader whom I later came to call a diminisher, but someone around whom they held back, played it safe, like hard problems aren't getting solved. And what we found, is that around these diminishing leaders, people were only able to operate at less than 50% of their capability, or maybe put more simply, these diminishing leaders were getting less than half of people's intelligence and talent. And then I asked those same people to describe a leader around whom they were at their best. Someone around whom hard problems get solved. You're making progress. And so many people reported that not only did they get 100% of my capability, I got smarter and more capable around this leader. They were leaders around whom other people were at their best and grew.
Wiseman discovered the majority of diminishing was actually coming from the accidental diminisher.
These are good people who are trying to be good managers, but yet doing things that seem good on the surface actually end up having as pronounced of a diminishing impact as some of these more extreme kinds of diminishers.
To avoid this, Wiseman says it's important to understand our behaviors as leaders by taking a step back.
When I see people struggling, I tend to jump in and help or jump in and take over. And instead saying, when I see someone struggling, that's going to be my cue to start asking questions and find out if they need help at all. What they might need is a listening ear. They might need coaching rather than you jumping in to do it for them.
In today's world, as we're constantly faced with uncertainty, multipliers are more needed than ever.
When leaders can create these coexistent conditions of psychological and intellectual safety on one hand, but then challenge and stretch and accountability on the other, it gives people, the permission, the safety they need to venture out, but just enough pressure that we have to find answers. And right now, people are trying to find answers amid a lot of uncertainty and a lot of dark. And so the multiplier leader is creating the condition where people can navigate in the dark and find answers amid a lot of uncertainty.
In the next chapter, we'll be introduced to Karen Dillon and the steps we can take to measure our own lives. Chapter 3. Karen Dillon.
I adore Karen Dillon, and Karen Dillon has chops. Karen Dillon and Clayton Christensen with other authors wrote many books, including one called How Will You Measure Your Life? This was a book that took kind of hardcore business research and principles and allowed the readers to apply it to their personal lives. Think about that. Business principles in our personal lives.
One of their key insights focused on how companies that achieved financial success often deviated from their original strategy.
They had to pivot. They had to self-destruct. They changed their strategy. They changed their mind. And whether the stat is exactly right is immaterial. It's that this is a leadership competency. Are you willing to change your mind? Are you open to be influenced?
But while working at her dream job, Dylan conducted an interview that would forever alter the way she measured her life. Let's learn more about that now.
So a few years ago, I was the editor of the Harvard Business Review magazine, a job that I considered to be the pinnacle of my career. I had the idea that talking to the soon-to-be graduates of Harvard Business School would be interesting because that was the spring of 2010. And that particular class of graduates had applied to business school when the economy was booming. And then when they entered business school, almost immediately the Great Recession kicked in. And so I just wondered if they had, in those 2 years of being at Harvard Business School, decided to recalibrate their definition of success, knowing they were coming out into a much rougher economy and maybe the world wasn't their oyster in the same way. I heard that they had asked a professor who was very well known, Clayton Christensen, to speak to their graduating class.
Clayton Christensen was a professor of business administration at the Harvard Business School. He was a leader in business and academic consulting, best known for pioneering the theory of disruptive innovation.
So I drove from our offices to the Harvard Business School campus, hurriedly, probably late, ran into his office, put my little digital recorder down. And as I sat down, I was thinking of my deadline and what else I had to do and what was I going to make for supper that night and what things was I behind on. My head was very full of other thoughts. An hour and a half later, when I left his office, I stood in the parking lot next to my car, unable to put the keys into my car. I just stood thinking about what we had talked about. After that conversation, I decided with my husband to leave my job at Harvard Business Review. We sold our family home. We literally walked away from the life we had spent years building. And so people would always say to me, what did he talk about with you that made you make that dramatic change? What we talked about are how the choices you make have consequences, the cause and effect, and you can apply business theory in some really powerful ways to your life. I wasn't putting my time and my energy towards the things I would have told you I valued most, which was my family and my friends. And so I had a resource allocation problem. I needed to change that. So I made a dramatic change in my life because of the business theory Clay and I talked about as you apply it to your life.
Christensen explained to Dylan that he started to notice a trend amongst his former Harvard classmates.
It started to bother him that he would find some of the classmates he thought had the most potential and were going to change the world, and they had visions of all the good things they were going to do. He'd find them either not turning up, unhappy with their lives, talking about being estranged from their children or divorces, or in jobs they didn't love but paid the bills or were making a lot of money. And it just made him sad that some of these people who he knew had so many options available to them were now 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, just really not happy with their lives.
Christensen looked to business theories and how they could help people find what truly matters. Each semester, Christensen would speak to his students on their final day of class in what many considered the most important lecture of the year.
And he would talk with the students about how this theory or that theory would apply to their lives, how to think about it. Clay used to say you put on a different set of lenses, and that was true. Once you put them on, you could never take them off. I see how I'm spending my time and energy is dramatically going to affect the strategy for my life. That's a resource allocation problem. So he gave those gifts to his students as tools, and it's been valuable to me personally ever since.
Research has shown that although money is important, it only matters up to a certain point.
Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman has measured happiness against salary for years, and the top level of being happy enough is not that high. It's under $100,000. People who make $200,000 and $300,000 and $400,000 are not substantially happier than those people who are at the top of his scale. Money does not make you happy. It can make you not unhappy, and it needs to be enough to make your life okay. But that is not where you really will find true happiness in your job.
Just as Christensen used to teach, these business principles can be applied to our personal lives. Intended strategy leads toward your deliberate strategy. But it's only when we can embrace an emergent strategy that we can manifest our realized strategy.
I think a lot of young people in particular think you're supposed to have a kind of 5 and 10 year game plan for your career. It's supposed to be by X date, I'll be a VP, and by Y date, I'll be earning such and such. You make plans based on goals that you think you're supposed to want. That's your deliberate strategy. That may be true, but it may also be true that you be well served, as many people are, at being open to emergent opportunities, to having an emergent strategy, especially when you're young in your career. You don't know exactly where you should be and what your path will be. And I think that's where great careers come from. It's not being so solely focused that you miss other exciting things that could lead you to new and interesting areas. So being open to the emergent opportunities is critical to a company's strategy and to people's strategy in their careers as well.
In the next chapter, Kim Scott explains why good leaders possess candor. Chapter 4. Kim Scott.
Kim Scott is one of my favorite all-time authors. Top 10 books, in my opinion, called Radical Candor. And I think this is one of the greatest gifts that leaders give their people. It's feedback on their blind spots. It's having the courage to move outside your comfort zone and discuss the undiscussable. What happens is people that continue to lose jobs or marriages or have problems in their life is because no one ever had the courage, typically, to sit them down and to have a respectful conversation that leaves them whole and doesn't damage their self-esteem or their self-confidence or worse, their self-worth.
Kim Scott served as a CEO coach for Dropbox, Qualtrics, Twitter, and many more tech companies. In her New York Times best-selling book, Radical Candor, How to Be a Kick-Ass Boss Without Losing Your Humanity, Scott sheds light on the importance of having tough conversations. So let's dim the lights and watch as Kim explains her experiences with feedback.
Feedback is really hard for every leader I've ever worked with, whether they're the CEO or a brand new manager. Shortly after I joined Google, I had an opportunity to receive some excellent radical candor. I had to give a presentation to the founders and the CEO about how the AdSense business was doing. And I walked into the room, and there in one corner of the room was one of the founders on an elliptical trainer wearing toe shoes in a bright blue spandex unitard. Not what I was expecting or really wanting to see, frankly, in the room. And there in the other corner of the room was the CEO. He was doing his email. It was like his brain had been plugged into the machine. So probably like you in such a situation, I felt a little bit nervous. How was I supposed to get these people's attention? Luckily for me, the AdSense business was on fire. And when I explained how many new customers we had added over the last couple of months, the CEO almost fell off his chair. What did you say? This is incredible. Do you need more marketing dollars? Do you need more engineering resources? So I'm feeling like the meeting's going all right. In fact, I now believe that I am a genius. And I walked out of the room after the meeting was over, and I was expecting a high five, a pat on the back from my boss. And instead she said, "Why don't you walk back to my office with me?" And I thought, oh, wow, I have screwed something up. And eventually she said to me, "You said a lot in there. Were you aware of it? I know this great speech coach. I bet Google would pay for it. Would you like an introduction?" And once again, I made this brush off gesture with my hand. I said, "No, I'm busy. I don't have time for a speech coach. Didn't you hear about all those new customers?" And then she stopped. She looked me right in the eye and she said, "I can tell when you do that thing with your hand that I'm going to have to be a lot more direct with you. When you say every third word, it makes you sound stupid." Now she's got my full attention. And some people might say it was mean of her to say that I sounded stupid. But in fact, it was the kindest thing she could have done for me at that moment in my career. It was almost like I suddenly realized I'd been marching through my whole career with a giant hunk of spinach between my teeth, and nobody had had the common courtesy to tell me that it was there.
Scott breaks down the process of giving feedback with a few simple key elements.
So here is your radical candor framework. The core idea of radical candor is that you care personally at the same time that you challenge directly. So vertical line, care personally, horizontal line, challenge directly. When you care and challenge at the same time, that's radical candor. But sometimes we remember to challenge directly, but we forget to show that we care personally. And then we wind up in obnoxious aggression.
Obnoxious aggression can hurt people and move them to a fight or flight mode, which often prevents them from truly listening.
I don't know about you, but when I realize I've been a jerk, it is not my instinct to go the right direction on the care personally dimension. It's my instinct to go the wrong way on challenge directly. And that is my hero's journey to the worst place of all, manipulative insincerity. This is what happens when we're neither caring nor challenging. And so if obnoxious aggression is front stabbing, manipulative insincerity is backstabbing, it is political behavior, passive aggressive behavior, all of the things that make a workplace toxic.
However, the vast majority of people generally fall into the quadrant of ruinous empathy.
Despite everything we see on social media, most people are actually pretty nice people. So we do remember to show that we care personally, but we're so concerned about not hurting someone's feelings that we fail to tell them something they'd be better off knowing in the long run.
A common managerial practice in the workplace is to be professional, which inadvertently results in some of us leaving who we really are at home.
And you can't possibly care personally if you're showing up at work like some kind of robot. So you really want to build teams on which everyone can be more than just professional. I'm not saying be unprofessional, but teams on which we can build real human relationships at work. Because it is the relationships that we form at work that often help us, unleash us to do the best work of our lives. The problem here begins not when we're 18 years old, but when we're 18 months old. And someone comes along and says to us, usually a parent, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And this is so hard. It's so hard to undo training that's been pounded into our heads since we were 18 years old, this be professional business. It's even harder to undo training that's been pounded into our heads since we were 18 months old, since we learned to speak.
But having difficult conversations and caring about employees' emotions are key to creating a healthy workplace.
This is part of the job. In fact, it is central to the job, because if you think that you can create a culture of feedback, that you can build a great team, that you can get stuff done, encourage that team to achieve fantastic results without a good relationship, you're kidding yourself. The relationships that you form as a leader with each of your direct reports are central to your success and their success.
In the next chapter, we'll be introduced to MJ Fiev and learn how she channels personal experiences to become an effective leader. Chapter 5. MJ Fiev.
My entire life has been the product of my efficiency. I do things fast. I do things quick. I get a lot done. I'm an early riser. I'm that neighbor that gets up every Saturday morning and has my car washed, lawn mowed, lawn raked, flowers planted by 9 o'clock. I make no apologies for my productivity or my efficiency. It is how my success has been derived. Except for when that efficiency mindset moves into my relationships with people. Because you cannot be efficient with people. You can only be effective. The reason I've chosen to highlight MJ Fiev as one of the master mentors is because she is, in my estimation, the best example I've ever experienced of the difference between being efficient and being effective. I've seen of that. She has a hyper-prolific career, but yet she is one of the best listeners, one of the most caring, one of the most compassionate people I've ever encountered. Every author wishes they had an MJ Fiev in their life.
Let's join Miller in watching Fiev's story. MJ Fiev is a prolific author, editor, educator, poet, and creator of the Badass Black Girl book series. Fiev spent her formative years reading countless books.
Growing up in Haiti, most of my mentors were authors. And one book, of course, that really changed my life was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
The book presents a principled, centered approach to dealing with both personal and professional relationships.
My entire life, I've focused on building those relationships, learning to walk in other people's shoes so that I can see what they want, what they need. That allowed me to align those wants and those needs with my own so that in the end, we get the results that we both want and both need, and the relationship remains strong.
Transparency is a key element in maintaining a healthy and supportive workplace.
One thing that I learned early on is that if you don't tell people your why, they will choose a why for you. People will assume that there's a reason why you're doing what you're doing. And the reason that they have in mind is not necessarily the reason that you have in mind. So clarity is very important.
Fiev's personal journey had a major impact on her leadership style.
Growing up in Haiti is a very unique experience. I often tell people that I felt that I was an adult for a long time. Even as a kid, you have to know what's going on in Haiti because your life might depend on it. You might find yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time. So survival skills are taught very early. But one thing that happens when you have to grow up too fast, you feel that you're part of a system as opposed to being an individual. You lose your innocence very early. So I always felt like I wasn't seen in that sense. So when I'm entering a conversation, when giving directions, when just managing my day, I make sure that I let people be seen, that I listen. It makes such a big difference when someone feels heard, feels seen. And I think that leaders need to remember that.
Another factor in leading with effectiveness is having a full, clear picture.
If you're going to fix a problem, you need to know what the problem is. If you're going to improve something that is already working well, you need to understand what it is exactly that's working well. And when I applied this idea to my books, particularly the first book in the series, Badass Black Girl, it's a celebration of everything that's wonderful about being Black. And I remind people that being Black is not all problems and issues and racism and just being the victim of prejudice. There's a lot of beauty and strength in Blackness. I'm thinking about my own country, Haiti, and the devastating earthquake that happened in 2010, and how people were out that night in the streets singing and just being resilient, right? It was really a demonstration of Haitian spirit, which is, yes, things happen, bad things happen, but we have to keep going. So there's this idea that we are strong because of our history. We are strong despite our history. We are strong because we understand that where there's difficulty, there's also blessings. That where there's ugliness, there's also beauty, and being able to get a clear picture of every situation. And it all goes back to being effective. Again, I will never say it enough. In order for you to be effective, you need a clear picture. The good, the bad, the ugly, a touch on all those aspects.
In the next chapter, we will hear from Whitney Johnson and her insights on self-growth and disruption. Chapter 6, Whitney Johnson.
Several years ago, I heard someone say something that was horrifyingly insulting, but it was also piercingly true. And it was the following. You're never in the room when your career is decided for you. I'm a strong advocate of taking deliberate control of your career and never turning it over to somebody else, not human resources, not professional development, and not your boss. That you take career and you decide when you will be disrupted. Whitney Johnson is a renowned podcast host, speaker, coach, and the author of numerous best-selling books, including Build an A-Team and my personal favorite, Disrupt Yourself. See, Whitney is an expert on the psychology behind disruption, both in business and in our personal lives, as well as in our careers.
Whitney Johnson is the CEO of the tech-enabled talent development company, Disruption Advisors. Here's Whitney Johnson's story in her own words.
Disruptive innovation is a term that was coined by Clayton Christensen, who was my mentor for about 10 years. And it's at its simplest, a silly little thing that takes over the world. Like the telephone did to the telegraph, like the automobile did to the horse and buggy. More recently, we've seen Netflix disrupt Blockbuster, and now cable TV, and Uber is disrupting cabs. So it almost starts out as a toy or something that people dismiss, they disregard, and then gradually and suddenly it upends or disrupts the market.
One key tool utilized at the Disruptive Fund is the S-curve. Originally pioneered in the 1950s and 60s by American sociologist Everett Rogers while he was studying corn farmers.
The S-curve can help us understand how we learn and how we grow, not just how groups change, but how individuals change over time. And so I reimagined it as the S-curve of learning. Whenever you start something new, your brain is running this predictive model. It has lots and lots of predictions, many of which are inaccurate. And so it's going to get them wrong, and you're going to have this drop in dopamine. And this is the place where you're at the launch point of the curve. Then you put in the effort, and you're going to hit that tipping point, and you'll move into this sweet spot, that steep, sleek back of the curve. And this is where you're continuing to make those predictions, but they're increasingly accurate. And then you reach mastery, and your predictive model is now actually complete. You've figured it out. And this is that place where you're really good at something, but you feel like you can no longer keep doing it because you're bored and you're not getting very much dopamine.
Johnson experienced firsthand how disruption can be applied to our personal lives and have an impact on career growth.
When I graduated from college, I moved to New York, and I was absolutely terrified. So here I am. I need to go out and work. And so my very first job was as a secretary working for a stockbroker. Well, across from my desk, there was this bullpen of young male stockbrokers, aspiring masters of the universe. And so they'd say things like, "It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that you should buy this stock." And then they would say, "Throw down your pom-poms and get in the game." And at first I was really offended because I was a cheerleader in high school. But I one day finally realized I needed to throw down my pom-poms. And so I started taking business courses at night, accounting, finance, economics. I had a boss who believed in me, which allowed me to move from being a secretary to an investment banker. And I would not have known to call it this then, but this was really the beginning of me disrupting myself. Today, I do what I do, which is I help other people figure out how to disrupt themselves, figure out how to grow through disruption.
Johnson believes we can utilize micro-disruptions to help slingshot us into our potential. These come in the form of 7 accelerants. The first one is to take the right kind of risks.
And this is where you're willing to play where you haven't played before, to take on market risk. And according to the theory of disruption, we oftentimes want to take on competitive risk, where we know there's a job opportunity, but 50 people are applying for it. It's going to be a lot harder to get the job. Whereas if you take market risk, you don't know if there's a job, but if you can create the job, then your odds of getting it go up significantly.
The second accelerant is playing to your distinctive strengths.
You want to leverage what you do uniquely well, because when you feel strong, you're willing to play where no one else is playing.
Number 3, embrace constraints.
It's so easy to say, if only I had more time, more money, more buy-in from my boss, then I could move up that S curve. But we know it's a law of physics that we need something to bump up against in order to gain traction. And so you want to think about your constraints as in fact, or this thing that you don't have enough of is in fact a tool of creation.
Number 4, examine your expectations.
So all along the curve, you want to examine your expectations because if you know what they are, you can manage them and then you don't stop.
Number 5, take a step back to slingshot forward.
When you disrupt yourself, when you step back to grow, you're basically saying, I believe if I step back over time, it'll be over 1 up 3 or over 1 up 5. And stepping back might be you just make a decision to recharge, to take a day off, to take a vacation in order to be able to move up that curve.
Number 6, leverage failure.
Failure is teaching us something. So if we can ditch the shame and use failure as a constraint, a tool of creation, we're learning faster and it gives us momentum to move up the curve.
And finally, be driven by discovery.
70% of all successful new businesses end up in a different place than where they initially started. And the same is true for us, is we want to take a step forward, gather feedback, and adapt.
Utilizing these tools will help us move through the growth cycle more quickly and more effectively. In the next chapter, we will meet Stephen M.R. Covey and discuss how strong leadership can unleash greatness in others. Chapter 7, Stephen M.R. Covey.
Dr. Stephen R. Covey, who is the co-founder of the Franklin Covey Company and, of course, the author of the seminal book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, has, I believe, 9 children, the oldest son of which is his namesake, Stephen M.R. Covey, who was the president of our company for many years and then went on to write a very influential book called The Speed of Trust. And he is one of the world's most credible authorities on how to become a trusted leader, how to build a high trust culture. So when I called up Stephen M.R. Covey and said, I want to feature you as a master mentor in this book, he, of course, thought it would be about the topic of trust. And I said, Stephen, I actually want to take a different tact on this. 25 years ago, when you were the CEO of our company, I remember as if it was yesterday, we were launching a new leadership solution. We had dates and timelines and events scheduled, and we had clients that had paid for this program. And to my horror and the horror of dozens of other salespeople, at the last moment, Stephen, as the CEO of the company, pulled the plug. We didn't launch the product. He absolutely made the right decision.
Just a few days before the launch, Covey was in the midst of reviewing the course when he realized that it wasn't quite ready to share with the world. Let's watch what happens next.
We were part of the way there, but not all the way there with what I saw. And that was a red flag for me. So I made that unpopular decision that we are going to pull the plug and we're going to double down on this, and we will go from good to great, from good to world-class to best in class when we launch this. And while it might disappoint in the short run, it will thrill in the long run. And it'll be a far better decision. The most important thing was the quality of the product. But because there was a cost or a consequence, that's why this made it a hard decision. That's why pulling the plug was so hard. Because a lot of people were mad at me. And in the long run, everyone was better off for having made it. Our salespeople sold a whole lot more. And the word of mouth reputation would have been, this is good, but not at the same level that you expect from Covey Leadership Center. The test of integrity is when there is a cost or a consequence in doing so. See, it's relatively easy to have integrity, to do the right thing when it doesn't cost me anything. We disappointed in the short run, but when we launched this, it was a smashing success. And it went on for a 10-plus year run. The cost was we disappointed people externally and internally. But I really believe that the reason it was the right thing, that the far greater disappointment would have been to have a substandard product offering out there.
In his latest book, Trust and Inspire, How Truly Great Leaders Unleash Greatness in Others, Covey outlines how today's leaders need to shift from command and control to trust and inspire.
It starts first with your fundamental beliefs, your paradigm, your mindset, seeing greatness in people, seeing people as whole people, not just economic beings, so an abundance mentality, seeing leadership as stewardship, and seeing also that your job as a leader is to go first, because influence is always from the inside out, so go first. Those are the beliefs. But then it moves into the actions, the behaviors, what I call the stewardships. And there's 3 of them: modeling, trusting, and inspiring. Modeling is who you are, your credibility, your moral authority. Trusting is how you lead by extending trust to people, being trusting of them. And that inspires them. It brings out the best in them. They rise to the occasion, they perform better, and they give their trust back to you. And inspiring is about connecting to why it matters. Connecting with people through caring and belonging, and connecting people to purpose and to meaning and to contribution. So a mentor inspires because they connect with people through caring.
Up next, we will recap the key insights from each of these master mentors. Conclusion.
People are getting interested in being a mentor. They ask me all the time, what are the criteria for being a mentor? How do you find a mentor? And that's exactly what this book does. It gives you access to a variety of master mentors, some of which are formal and informal in my life. I'm the mentee, just listening and learning, and I hope you've had the same experience from this video book.
And for our grand finale, let's listen in as all of our master mentors discuss the power of mentorship.
There's nothing that clarifies your own thinking than having to be a mentor to someone else, to distill what you've observed and to offer that as lessons for other people to help learn. So be a mentor to help inspire the people behind you, but also be a mentor to hold yourself accountable for being an inspirational kind of leader.
You know, you may look at Scott or me or somebody else and say they're a mentor, right? But all of us that are listening to this, I know are mentors, because that's why you're attracted to this topic. And when you're a mentor, nobody feels the need to help you because they feel like you know everything. That is so wrong, right? So, I mean, I want people to hear, like, I seek out mentorship.
There's so much growth that we can all grow along the way, and life doesn't have to take a path that the world tells you to take. Deciding what path you want to take for yourself and what will truly make you happy is a really important part of being on a journey that you want to be on.
The magical thing about mentorship is that very often a mentor can make an introduction, can share their own experience. It just takes that mentor 5-10 minutes, but it can really change the trajectory of your life.
You're at the launch point, and it is terrifying. And sometimes in the sweet spot, it's terrifying. And in mastery, it's terrifying because you don't know what you're going to do next. And what a mentor does for you, what they say to you is, walk in this direction. I will guide you so that you can make a little bit more progress than you're making now, so that it isn't a problem and it is always about learning.
So I think there's nothing more significant than the power of mentorship today, because a mentorship implies those 2 things. First, being a model, but second, having a relationship of trust.
Without other people, without mentors, either direct mentors or indirect mentors, we're nothing.
What I think is great about the book is it hits everyone exactly where they are in their life, where you are on your own individual journey.